just incredible to like think about that. It's supposed to be your rival. I know, like there's very much so mutual respect between the players and all that, and coaches, very much so respect. But I know Fred Hoiberg, I know Nate Lenzer. They're not big fans of Iowa because they're Iowa State connections. That has to hurt a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like it probably hurts them a lot, to be honest.
Welcome back to Nebraska Shoot Around. I'm Austin Jacobsen, back in for Anna Bellinghausen this week. Mike Sautter, of course, joins us, and a little bit more of a disappointing way to start out the show. So let's just rip off the Band-Aid. Nebraska men's basketball ending their season on a losing streak, and a lot of disappointment, obviously, in Husker land. Let's start with maybe some of the positives coming from 2 straight losses, at least from last week. The loss at Ohio State had one of the all-time performances and one that many people will remember from Bryce Williams.
Yeah. How about that? You have one guy score 43 points, set a single game program record. You have a 5-point lead in overtime, and somehow you lose the game. Unbelievable, actually. Yeah. Like it is truly unbelievable. So, yeah, tough loss. One of those that, like, if you win that, it doesn't really matter what happens in Iowa, like, because then you're actually in the Big Ten tournament, and you win that. It's another quad 1 win. That's 7, and you're squarely like right, probably on a little bit of the right side of the bubble. But they lost that, and then they lost to Iowa.
Yeah. And obviously the loss to Iowa, very different from the Ohio State game too, because at least from my perspective, you were obviously at PBA for the game. That felt like the complete opposite team effort, energy, and everything that came from being in Columbus to then being back at home.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, so Bryce Williams didn't play great, right, in his senior day performance. And it's something where Fred brought up, I'll always remember my senior day because I didn't play well and I didn't shoot it well and whatever. It was almost like Fred was like saying a prophecy of what was going to happen with Bryce Williams. Bryce ended up 3 of 12 in that game and 7 points. Like, yes, Juwan Gary played great, played hard, and had 24 and 7 rebounds, and like he filled that gap, but no one else helped fill that gap really either, as far as, you need 20 from Bryce to win, and they didn't. And so their season isn't over, but for all intents and purposes, it's pretty over.
And it was odd too, especially at the end of the game. The most emotion I felt like we saw from the team was actually from Iowa hugging Juwan Gary as he checked out of the game. It was just a weird atmosphere all around. The crowd never really could get into it either.
Yeah, and you could tell the crowd wanted to, like, they were trying. And then, whoever's in charge of the in-house, media thing, they were doing the cheers, like where you like, where they start like hitting on the bar and then like clapping and stuff. They tried that at like the under 4 timeout when the game was still, they could have came back, and it didn't go. Like it just didn't like give it juice, which you're doing that, you're trying to give some juice, and it just didn't. It was pretty flat. I don't know. It might be something where they look at senior day and they do it like the women and do it after the game.
Right.
Just to kind of like get it over with, if you will, or like not have it be an issue, because it kind of felt like the emotion of all that, and then you're trying to go out and play again and turn that around and change your emotion right away, didn't really happen. Now, Juwan Gary started the game fantastic. Step back 3 from him, his like bonus points, and then hit another 3. So he came out pretty fired up, but not really. It was just like a blah game.
Yeah.
Defensively, they weren't great. And the weird thing about it is, like, Nebraska did not shoot the ball well. They shot 35% and 22% from 3 against the worst defensive efficiency team in the Big Ten, the worst field goal percentage team in the Big Ten, and the worst effective field goal percentage in the Big Ten. like or second to last. Like how do you do that? Like it just didn't make sense. So I mean, Iowa even had 34 points in the paint to Nebraska's 30, and it's one of those like, what are we doing? I mean, both teams only turned it over 7 times. It's fine. That's amazing. But Iowa also had 34 bench points to Nebraska's 14.
Mhm.
It just laid an egg in the worst possible time because they had to win that game, obviously, to even extend their season a little bit into the Big Ten tournament. Now, Fred did say after the game, and we all kind of understood that that wasn't going to be the last game of the season because they'll probably play in whatever this crown thing
Right.
is. That is just a throwaway. It's not. I mean, it starts in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
There's going to be roster turnover for everybody in 3 weeks before that thing even starts.
Yeah, think of the Husker football game, the bowl game where you saw a lot of transfer situation. Yeah, it could the very similar thing could happen.
Now they have 6 seniors that they're not going to go anywhere. So like and I don't think Connor Season's really going to go anywhere. So like I think probably they'll be able to fill the team in a roster.
Right. But that's my question is, I guess when it comes to playing in the crown, you mentioned that gap and you have a disappointing way to finish out your season at home.
How do you flip it?
And how do you get motivated for that, especially when the goals of this team, when you began January, you were almost a lock in to get in the NCAA tournament, and then you're not there.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a wild ride if you think about where this team was. January 7th, they go to Iowa. They are 12-2, and like overall, they go to Iowa. They blow a 15-point lead with just under 15 minutes left, and everything changed.
Mm-hmm.
The whole season changed with that one game. And then fast forward to the last regular season game, and it's your rival, Iowa, who knocks you out
at home.
Like, so Iowa basically ruined their season twice.
Yep. It started and ended it. Really, kind of the skid in the fall from there.
And it's just incredible to like think about that. It's supposed to be your rival. I know, like, there's very much so mutual respect between the players and all that, and coaches, very much so respect. But I know Fred Hoiberg, I know Nate Lenzer. They're not big fans of Iowa because they're Iowa State connections. That has to hurt a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like it probably hurts them a lot, to be honest. And I don't know, like, we're looking ahead, it's, you'll have Rice and Juwan and Raleigh, like all the seniors will play or be on the team, but you probably could see like a Gavin Griffiths probably move on. I would feel probably pretty okay about that. Right. Like, I think that is probably a possibility.
But that moving forward as well, the team does also add a familiar face into next season's plans with Rink Mass.
Yeah.
How do you see, from what you've seen from this year's team, their expectations and falling short, obviously, the turnover that's to come? What is the priority position that they need to either attack in the portal or need to get drastic improvement from before the start of next year?
I'll answer that after I say this. Right. Rink Mass, if healthy this year on this team, they would have won at least 4 more games and be going to the NCAA tournament with a healthy, available available for a majority of the year. Rink Mass, they would have won at least 4 more games, maybe more.
Right.
Like, he's that important to what they did 2 years ago. Or last year, not this year. Where they go, hopefully you get Rink Mass to come back and stay, which I think at this point is probably it. He will, unless he wants to go start his professional career overseas, which I don't know. The money doesn't add up there, right? Like, you stay and make the money for 1 year. Then you absolutely need a scorer because you lose Bryce. You need like everything, to be honest.
And that's the unfortunate part.
You need a backup center behind Rink, which that was supposed to be Andrew Morgan this year. He was supposed to be the backup. Ended up being the starter at the end of the year. And that after the Rink news, then they had to go get Braxton Mia, who, by the way, didn't play on senior day because his back was tight or something. Like, that's a little questionable in my opinion. like you can't give anything. Like I don't know, especially for a guy that's probably he's not going to play in the NBA and he's probably going to get a chance to play somewhere like after. But I'm just not a huge fan. So you get Sam Hoiberg back going forward. Barricade Buchtenjo likely probably going to come back. Connor Segan back. What do you do with Hail Jacobsen? Do you put him on scholarship because you have the 15? You can't do walk-ons anymore.
Right.
Yeah, there's a lot of holes.
It feels like you mentioned a lot of role pieces and not a lot of key pieces.
There is,
right?
Besides Rink, there isn't a lot of key pieces.
And so is it about going out and, the talk has been about prioritizing the money and all that sort of stuff? You're going to have to spend to get one of those key pieces to come in.
I think so revenue sharing, they're going to get some of that money. People talk about that NIL thing. I I'm not buying it at all. Yes. Okay. Was Nebraska this roster or the money, the NIL money, was it the highest in the Big Ten? Absolutely not. Was it the worst? Absolutely not. Was it somewhere in the middle? Yes. Talking about roughly $2 million was the roster.
Yeah.
Or I guess going forward we can say salary cap.
Right. It's a big middle, to be fair. I mean, you're one between 18.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty big middle, but yes,
right
you are correct. Yeah.
So it was about $2 million. And so this year they're going to have, sounds like roughly maybe $3 million in revenue sharing that they'll be able to use. And then it sounds like that NIL number will jump a little bit more. So you probably have anywhere from 5 to 6 million to build a roster this year, which is fantastic because that is probably right about what you need. It's just finding the right people for those dollars and right fit and how it's going to all work. They got a lot of work to do.
Yep.
In the portal, a ton. I mean, a ton. So where does that go? I mean, you need a defender, you need a scorer, you need a defensive guy, you need a scorer at the 2, you need a power forward, you need a backup center. Both point guards are gone, so you need 2. Yeah.
And to be fair, they did make a roster turnover like this past season as well. So it's not like
but they struck out on those.
Exactly. So it's a little bit different when, especially you don't have key pieces like Jawan Gary and Bryce Williams returning. You're relying on someone who missed an entire season and you're hoping that he gets back to the level in which he played.
Full knee. I mean,
right.
Just everything.
So let's wrap up the men's side, obviously. And there's been the ever-growing conversation about a hot seat or where it is for Fred Hoiberg. And we've pretty much said that he should be and is safe, right?
Yeah.
But the start of next season maybe warming up a little bit for Hoiberg?
Yeah, I think it probably is. They're not going to make a change.
Right.
Like, he got an extension at the end of the year last year. I like Fred. I think he actually is a very good coach, great person. I like their staff. I don't think that was it. I do think Fred's a great basketball mind. Now, is there going to be some pressure next year? Yeah. I mean, probably should be at this point. He also, that extension, like, we're talking like a $20 million buyout.
It's a big buyout. Yeah.
They're not going to do that.
Right.
Unless someone just was like, I will write the check. Which I don't see that happening. So that would be crazy. One, we probably would already find out.
Right.
Like, I don't think that talk is, I think, way far-fetched.
It's a bit premature, it feels like, yes.
Yeah, I think it's really far-fetched. Now, could I see some staff changes and movement there? Yeah.
Because we've seen that before.
Yeah, I think that's probably something that probably should happen, or we likely will see happen. And just different roles changing and different things. There needs to be some. It's good to probably shake things up a little bit. I don't know what that is, but I think there's probably a chance we see some of that. Again, they're not they're not firing Fred Hoiberg right now. Like
we're just going to look in.
Yeah,
they are not firing Fred Hoiberg.
That would be.
It'd be a terrible clip to come out later.
It would be crazy. Yeah,
terrible.
But I feel really strongly that that's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
And they'll work hard to get it done. They do work. They work extremely hard. It's just kind of like the money that they spent this year didn't pan out. Like it just didn't. It panned out. Look, did they have a winning record? Yes. Did they win in Hawaii and win that tournament? Yes. Did they reach their goals? Absolutely not.
Yep.
Like absolutely not.
They set a bar of expectation, didn't?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like they set that bar when the moment Bryce and Juwan announced they were coming back, that bar was, we want to win our first NCAA tournament game with this group.
Right.
That didn't happen. So, and they're, obviously really far away from that happening.
Yeah.
So it's one of those where you have to really look inside yourself as your operation and your staff and who's doing what and how it's working and how the recruiting is talked about and it worked internally, which there seems like there's some separation with it, which is odd that to me, and it happens all over the country. It's like, well, this is that guy's guy and that guy's guy. And this guy has these guys. Well, why don't y'all talk about it? Like, and come together. I don't, that's the one thing that drives me a little crazy. And Nebraska's not alone in that. Everyone in the country does it. It's like, are we working together or are we working individually?
Well, regardless, Fred Hoiberg likely coming back at the start of 2025 and the end of this calendar year, beginning of next season. But the Nebraska women actually kind of picked up their game quite a bit there, especially late. Did a mini Big Ten tournament run, which I'm not sure many people would have credited them with. I'll even count myself in that. I wasn't sure what the ceiling would have been for this team, but you get a first-round win over Rutgers. You then take an upset win over number 7 Illinois in the Big Ten tournament, and of course fall to the eventual Big Ten tournament champion in UCLA. Pretty impressive performances and quite a battle there in the second round against Illinois.
Yeah, and winning. So I think everyone expected them to beat Rutgers, which they did. Winning against Illinois was going to be a little bit of a question. It was like, they probably can, but I don't know, and we'll see. And then winning that game solidified for sure that they're going to be an NCAA tournament team. And I've felt that way all year that they're going to be one. And then how they played against UCLA. UCLA's really good. It's just a really tough matchup.
But comparatively to the last time they played at UCLA, much better performance.
Way better. And, I think as the season went on, Britt Prince got a little more comfortable. It's just, it's weird that like what Britt did against UCLA in Illinois, people are like, whoa. And it's like, okay, you need, like, I've been paying attention for like 4 years. So she's phenomenal and she's really good. And it is a little bit of passing the torch.
Yeah, that's
time.
That's what I was going to ask next, because, where this team can go realistically is probably a short tenure in the NCAA tournament. We'll know their process, their seeding and selection Sunday.
They're going to end up probably one of 6 places. It sounds like maybe LSU, South Carolina, Texas, South Bend, which are all
right. All are tough
teams.
Yes, all are very tough. But then on that opposite side is, what do you want to get out of this tournament moving forward?
Right.
And if that means a passing of the torch, because if you're thinking how this game goes and their first or second round matchups, right, it's going to be Alexis Markowski highlighted first, and then maybe talking some Britt Prince. It'd be great to get the national conversation going for Britt Prince. And like you said, that passing of the torch could happen, at least in the national scope and conference scope here in the next coming
weeks. No question. And obviously, Nebraska should ride Alexis Markowski. She's going to have her, if she doesn't have her number retired, it would be a travesty. She will. So, they're still going to ride that. Right. And they should, but it is kind of like, okay, like it's going to be Britt's time and show and all that. Now, what that looks like, we can talk about it after the season, what this roster and team looks like going forward. They have obviously a huge hole to fill with Alexis graduating. You have some other seniors and all of that. So you need a little more athleticism and a little better pieces around Britt to kind of, elevate and basically keep Britt happy, because you don't want her leaving.
Right. But it's the opposite conversation of the men, where you have a key piece and you can build around Britt Prince.
No question. No question at all. And they should absolutely build around her. She is phenomenal. She's phenomenal. She's a phenom. And I've said that since she was a freshman in high school. Like, she's a phenom. And you need to do everything you can to build around her and to make the pieces fit around her. Maybe even change system a little bit, which they won't, because it's still kind of free flowing. Get shots up, threes, get some post touches and all that. So it'll be fine. They're obviously going to make the NCAA tournament. I would be stunned.
So for the NCAA tournament, then, you've seen this team through different stretches of the year. Obviously, they've overcome many, many injuries. This team has drastically changed since we saw them in the beginning of November. But what's the best value matchup? I don't want necessarily maybe like a team that's out there. If a team comes in and has to play Nebraska, what's Nebraska's best chance to get a win? What does that team look like?
Well, someone not with the size of a UCLA, right? Which is going to be hard, because wherever they're going to be slated, they're going to be like the 8 or 9 probably seed, and then you're in a 1 or 2 seeds bracket and on their home court. Most of the time they have, pretty good athletes and size and all that stuff. So maybe, like, shoot, they could go maybe play UConn. I don't know.
Right.
So that could be something that actually is kind of maybe a possibility. So you're going to need a team that doesn't have a lot of length on the wing, for sure, and struggles a little bit defensively, especially 3-point defense, because Nebraska likes taking threes, and hopefully they can make some. And a team that doesn't have a lot of depth, because Nebraska has they play a lot of players, but they need, at different times, they've stepped up and hasn't been super consistent with bench play. So I think that's what they'll need to have happen.
And of course, the selection Sunday for the Nebraska women will be on Sunday. We will wait to see where their matchup goes, but likely the men, I guess there's still a percentage possibility that they could still get into the tournament, but more than likely getting into the postseason crown that will be coming near the end of the month. But as it stands right now, it's just another episode of Nebraska Shoot Around. Mike, appreciate your time as always.
Yeah. We'll maybe have to do some down the road here a little bit.